There is one missile that Russian President Vladimir Putin fears above all others: the Tomahawk. Putin knows Ukraine could use that missile to strike deep into Russia. He also knows, after seeing what happened to Iran during Operation Midnight Hammer, that Russia's air defenses wouldn't be able to do a thing to stop the Tomahawk. And now, that missile may soon be in Ukraine's hands. Putin's worst nightmare may be coming true, as Ukraine seems to be on the verge of getting Tomahawks that could devastate Russia. That's according to the Kyiv Post, which reported on July 15th that US President Donald Trump has discussed the possibility of sending Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine as part of a recently announced $10 billion aid package. That package, which is being financed by the European members of NATO and will see scores of US-made missiles arriving in Ukraine, is already massive news. It's a sign that Trump is done with Putin's gamesmanship and is ready to throw his full support behind Ukraine. If Tomahawks are part of that package, the US may be delivering a game-changer to Ukraine. The Kyiv Post reports that Trump discussed the possibility with his staff on July 11th, just days before the aid package announcement. The idea is that the missiles, along with all of the other weapons included in the package, will be sold by the US to other NATO members, who then transfer them to Ukraine. But there is a caveat to what seems like great news for Ukraine. The US hasn't confirmed the sale of Tomahawks yet. The powerful missiles still very much sit in the maybe pile when it comes to the $10 billion aid package, though Ukraine will be hoping that it soon shifts to the confirmed pile. Even if it doesn't, the package looks set to offer a huge boost to Ukraine's war effort. The Kyiv Post says that we now know for sure that the new aid package will include as many as 17 Patriot air defense systems, along with other missiles and artillery systems. Beyond that, The Guardian says Ukraine is still awaiting more details on specifically what the package will include. The country has expressed gratitude that the package is even being discussed at all, with the deputy head of Ukraine's military intelligence unit, Major General Vadim Skibitsky, stating, "We don't know exactly," when discussing the package. However, Skibitsky did confirm that Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky had discussed the possibility of Tomahawks being included in a conversation with Trump on July 4th. Skibitsky says that the call involved Trump asking Zelensky if it was possible for Ukraine to strike St. Petersburg. Zelensky replied, "Yes, absolutely. We can if you give us the weapons. The Tomahawk is one of the missiles that would make such strikes possible." Still, no agreement has been reached on the missiles, but Tomahawks now appear to be on the table. That will make Putin furious. For months, he has been attempting to play Trump by claiming he wants to bring peace to the Ukraine war, even as his aerial assaults on Kyiv intensify and he launches his summer offensive to take more of the country's territory. The US sending Tomahawks to Ukraine would represent two things: the failure of Putin's game playing and a brand new threat for Moscow to deal with as the war moves deeper into its fourth year. Even if the US does provide these missiles to Ukraine, there will be challenges ahead. The Guardian points out that Skibitsky has already noted that Ukraine might face issues with actually using them. They are not easy to use. The main launchers are combat ships or strategic bombers. "We don't have any strategic bomber aircraft," the intelligence head claimed. However, these are the types of challenges that Ukraine has been overcoming throughout the war. It's managed to configure its Soviet-era jets to fire French-made Atom hammer bombs that aren't supposed to be compatible, for instance. If Ukraine received Tomahawks, the odds are that it would figure out a way to use the missiles against Russia. That's why Putin is furious. But Russia's leader is also scared. Why? Because the Tomahawk arriving in Ukraine represents an escalation in Ukraine's arsenal that would give it the ability to strike a bevy of new targets on Russian territory. Developed during the Cold War era and entering service in 1983, the Tomahawk land attack cruise missile is a subsonic weapon designed to travel over long ranges before devastating a target. The US built it to provide itself with the sort of deep strike capabilities that are vital to Ukraine right now, which alone would make it an invaluable weapon for Zelensky's forces. The missile's design alone spells bad news for Russia. The Tomahawk combines stability, maneuverability, and stealth, with Army recognition pointing out that it has a low radar cross-section and tends to hug the terrain while on its flight path. In other words, Tomahawks fly low and fast enough to make them very difficult for even Russia's most advanced air defense systems to detect them, never mind shooting them out of the skies. As Army recognition puts it, once deployed, the missile's low-altitude flight capability and advanced navigation systems ensure that it remains highly effective against heavily defended targets. The missile also packs a heavy punch. Its warhead is designed to be modular, meaning the user can pick and choose what type of warhead to use for a specific mission. If Ukraine wants to attack a hardened target, for instance, it can load the Tomahawk with a high-explosive warhead capable of delivering a powerful and focused blast against the target. Bunkers, reinforced structures, and similar installations can all fall victim to this terrifying warhead. Ukraine also has the option of packing a submunition warhead into Tomahawk missiles, which disperse bomblets over a wide area to make them ideal for targeting broader areas. Imagine a larger Russian assault involving hundreds of troops and armored vehicles, and you see the utility. A single Tomahawk could devastate this type of assault, relieving pressure on the Ukrainian defenders in the process. The missile can even be packed with a penetrator warhead, which Ukraine could use to take out ammunition stockpiles and other high-value targets buried deep underground or protected by heavy fortifications. Versatility lies at the core of the Tomahawk's design. Putin doesn't want Ukraine to have so many options. Speed and accuracy are also major features of this powerful missile. The Tomahawk isn't the fastest cruise missile in the world. It's capable of traveling at speeds of Mach 0.75. Though fast and subsonic, that speed isn't so high that it couldn't be tracked by a Russian air defense system, such as the S-400. However, combining that speed with the radar cross-section and terrain-hugging flight path we mentioned earlier makes the Tomahawk a difficult prospect for Putin's forces to handle. The missile can also travel over very large distances, with the latest Block 5 variant having a range of just under 1,120 miles. As for accuracy, the Tomahawk is loaded with several technologies that ensure it hits its target. GPS is built in to provide mid-course guidance for the missile. The GPS supports an inertial navigation system, or INS, which ensures a Tomahawk stays on track even as it hugs terrain on its way to the target. The missile also uses terrain contour matching, or TERCOM, to ensure accuracy. TERCOM allows the missile to be loaded with a series of digital maps of the terrain it has to navigate, allowing a Tomahawk missile to adjust its flight path in real time to avoid any obstacles that could lead to an early detonation. Add a digital scene-matching area correlation system into the mix, through which the Tomahawk compares real-time images gathered by its onboard sensors with more stored reference images, and there are no concerns about the terminal phase. The Tomahawk hits its target far more often than not. Putin's only solace is that the missile is very difficult for Ukraine to use. Army recognition says that the missile is typically launched from surface ships and submarines. Ukraine has none of the latter. As for surface ships, Ukraine has a small navy predominantly made up of patrol vessels and mine warfare ships. It has no destroyers, frigates, or corvettes, according to military aggregator Global Firepower, which should mean it also has no obvious way to fire a Tomahawk missile. But maybe it won't need ships. As the Kyiv Post points out, there is a ground-launched variant of the Tomahawk the US could provide to Ukraine. The mid-range capability version of the missile can be fired using ground launchers, though some sacrifices are made to its speed. This variant travels at around 500 miles per hour, which amounts to Mach 0.65, but it still includes the navigation features and terrain-hugging capabilities that make the standard Tomahawk such a scary prospect for Putin. Could that be the missile that the US is considering sending to Ukraine? We don't know the answer yet. However, it's important to reiterate that no decisions have been made on the Tomahawk yet. There's no official confirmation that the missile will be part of the $10 billion aid package, despite the conversations that took place between Trump and Zelensky earlier in July. What we do know is that this isn't the first time that speculation has run rampant over Tomahawks arriving in Ukraine. Back in October 2024, the New York Times reported on Zelensky's so-called victory plan for the Ukraine war. At the time, Ukraine's president was pushing that plan onto Western leaders, providing them with a multi-point strategy he believed would allow Ukraine to overcome Russia. Tomahawks might have been part of that plan. In one part not made public, Mr. Zelensky proposed a non-nuclear deterrence package in which Ukraine would get Tomahawk missiles, a totally unfeasible request, a senior US official said, according to the New York Times. An unfeasible request toward the end of 2024 suddenly seems to be a lot more feasible in July 2025. And that leads us to the obvious question: why would Tomahawks matter to Ukraine? We'll get to the potential uses for the missile in a moment. However, the big reason that the US is now considering sending these missiles to Ukraine is precisely the reasoning suggested in Zelensky's victory plan. Trump wants to put pressure on Putin. In October, the pressure would have come from granting Ukraine deep strike capabilities, with a missile analysts believe Russia would struggle to defend against. Deterrence was the idea. With Tomahawks in Ukraine, Putin would have to think twice about the aerial assaults he's been launching at his enemy's cities and infrastructure. That aspect of the pressure game is still in play. During 2025, Russia's aerial offensive against Ukraine has intensified. The Institute for Science and International Security points out that the period between March 1st and May 12th of this year saw Russia launch daily Shahid drone strikes against Ukraine's cities, with those drones often being accompanied by missiles. A staggering 7,974 drones were launched into Ukraine during this period, which amounts to about 109 drones per day. 999 of them managed to hit their targets, giving Russia a 12.5% hit rate. The drones and missiles are still coming, and Russia is firing more of them than ever. In June 2025, it broke its record for the most rockets and drones launched in a single month with 5,209. That's almost 10 times the 580 Russia launched a year prior. In July, Russia broke its single-day record with a strike that included 728 drones and 13 missiles. These intensified aerial assaults are also leading to more civilian deaths, according to the Atlantic Council. It says that June 2025 saw Ukraine record its highest civilian casualty rate in over 3 years, with 232 deaths and 1,343 injuries. Danielle Bell of the UN's monitoring mission outlined the situation succinctly. "Civilians across Ukraine are facing levels of suffering we have not seen in over 3 years," she said. "The surge in long-range missile and drone strikes across the country has brought even more death and destruction to civilians far away from the front line." Tomahawk missiles wouldn't directly solve this problem. However, they could offer the deterrence Ukraine needs to place pressure on Putin whenever he considers okaying one of Russia's more intense airstrikes. It's one thing to grant permission for such a strike when you know that your enemy can only reply with long-range drones that can't destroy Russia's most valuable assets. It's quite another to do it when you know that Tomahawk missiles, capable of traveling massive distances to decimate hardened targets and underground targets, might await. Beyond creating this type of pressure on Putin, the US may also want to give Tomahawks to Ukraine to force Putin to the negotiating table. That pressure was apparently a key point of focus during the July conversation between Trump and Zelensky, says David Ignatius of The Washington Post. Ignatius claims his sources revealed that Trump told Zelensky that Ukraine needed to put more pressure on Putin by gaining the ability to strike St. Petersburg as well as Moscow. Tomahawks would grant that ability. Trump also considered sending Tomahawk cruise missiles, the same weapons fired against Iranian targets last month, Ignatius writes. If fired from Ukraine, these could hit Moscow and St. Petersburg, and they were included in discussion as late as Friday. But the Tomahawks are off the delivery list for now, I'm told. They could be deployed later if Trump wants even more leverage, and leverage is the point. Since becoming president, Trump has been trying to negotiate peace between Russia and Ukraine. He'd claimed he could do that in a single day, with CNN reporting that he made that claim 53 times on the campaign trail. We know that hasn't happened, but Trump appeared to be making progress when his administration agreed on a 30-day ceasefire with Zelensky's team during a March meeting in Saudi Arabia. Putin said no to that ceasefire, and he's continued saying no ever since, shooting down every proposal put in front of him because he thinks Russia is winning the war. These repeated refusals have infuriated Trump. And that's where Tomahawk missiles come into play. In his Washington Post piece, Ignatius makes the point that Trump may now be looking to de-escalate by escalating the Ukraine war. In other words, the US might grant Ukraine the ability to strike deeper into Russian territory as a way to give the country more leverage over Putin at a time when Russia's leader thinks he holds all of the cards. Trump decided to escalate for 3 reasons, according to a source familiar with administration discussions, Ignatius says. First, he believed that Putin was disrespecting him, feigning a readiness to make peace, but ignoring the US president's calls for a ceasefire. Second, he saw the efficacy of US military power in the use of B-2 bombers and Tomahawk missiles against Iran. And third, he thought Putin would only negotiate if threatened with greater force. As the Russians like to say, Trump decided to escalate to de-escalate. The point here is that Trump seems to have recognized that Putin isn't going to negotiate willingly. Sending Tomahawks to Ukraine might just force Russia's leader to the table. After all, it's a tactic that has worked before. On May 25th, Defense Express published a piece in which it pointed out that deploying Tomahawk missiles in the Philippines has achieved the desired effect of striking fear into China. That move prompted a rebuke from China in the form of a document in which Beijing denounced what it called revisionism and made several references to rising regional tensions and foreign interference. Beyond all of that bluster was clear fear. If China wasn't worried about Tomahawk missiles, they wouldn't have spent time creating a document indirectly decrying their presence in the Philippines. The US might hope that sending Tomahawks to Ukraine would prompt a similar response. Putin would know how damaging those missiles can be to his country. He's also seen what happened during Operation Midnight Hammer in Iran, which saw Iran's predominantly Russian-made air defenses utterly fail to deal with US missiles, including Tomahawks. Check out our video covering why that operation terrified Russia if you want to find out more. The point is that Putin knows that Russia's air defenses can't stop Tomahawk missiles. Escalate to de-escalate. That's the strategy the US would employ if it sent Tomahawks to Ukraine. Finally, there's the strike potential. United 24 media makes the obvious point that Tomahawk missiles grant Ukraine the ability to strike more targets in Russia than ever before. It notes that Ukraine does have long-range drones capable of flying deep into Russia. However, those drones move slower and pack far less of a punch than Tomahawk missiles, meaning they can't cause anywhere near as much damage. With Tomahawks, Ukraine gains the ability to strike well over a dozen airfields inside Russia that are responsible for launching glide bombs into Ukraine. It will also be able to target large weapon depots, United 24 says. That's what it did in Toropets, using drones back in September in a strike that destroyed ammunition Russia uses in its Grad, S-300 and S-400 systems. That strike also decimated some of Russia's Iskander and KN-23 ballistic missiles. With Tomahawks, more strikes like these become possible deeper into Russia, and the US-made missiles can do far more damage than Ukraine's drones are capable of causing. Add military and industrial facilities such as oil refineries into the mix, and Putin will know that Tomahawks can cause serious problems for his military machine. That's the last thing he wants when he has launched a summer offensive in which he needs to keep hundreds of thousands of Russia's soldiers supplied with fuel, ammunition and equipment. As United 24 concludes, Tomahawks could significantly expand Ukraine's strike capabilities, enabling attacks on weapon depots, logistics hubs, military bases and manufacturing facilities deep into Russian territory, boosting Ukraine's ability to defend itself and slow down the Russian war machine. And that's what it's really all about. The US knows that Tomahawks arriving in Ukraine is a nightmare for Putin. Right now, those missiles aren't confirmed to be coming, but the mere mention of them places pressure on Russia's president. The US will be hoping that pressure alone delivers the leverage needed to bring Putin back to the negotiating table. If it doesn't, we may soon see the rumors of Tomahawk missiles being sent to Ukraine transform into a reality that allows Ukraine to do more damage to Russia than ever before. And it's not just Tomahawk missiles about which Putin has to worry. Ukraine may soon be getting its hands on JASSM cruise missiles that will allow it to strike into the heart of Russia. Discover more in our video and remember to subscribe to The Military Show for more videos covering the latest developments in the bumper military aid package announced by the US. And thank you, as always, for watching.